Welcome to the Black Girl Burnout Podcast. Kelly here. And today I'm so excited. Our guest is Emily Rumble. Emily is a licensed clinical social worker. So already she's after my own heart. Social Workers Unite. She has a background in something called bibliopsychotherapy or bibliotherapy. She has 15 years experience in this. Let me tell you all about bibliotherapy. I'm so excited about this. If you are a reader, this episode is for you. Send it to all your friends because bibliotherapy cracked me open in the best way. Bibliotherapy is basically a therapy technique where you utilize literature to heal. That means fiction, nonfiction, poems, plays, things that can help you see yourself, heal yourself, unpack trauma, and culturally ground and connect. The conversation with Emily was so powerful and so fun. We get into a lot of things, including her recs for the summer, what we should be reading. For bonus listeners, you'll get my recs too. And she is on a mission really to integrate the creative arts in psychotherapy, mental well-being, and self-improvement. This is our summer of yes. This is the summer where we get to break free of the burdens we are carrying, avoid burnout, move forward, and heal. And what if your summer read could have the byproduct of healing you a bit in the process? Let's jump into the episode and see all of what Emily has to say. Emily, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. And we were just saying this off camera. I am genuinely excited. We have had a couple of missed connections where you were sitting there waiting, and I was like, I need to connect with this person. So I am so excited to have you here for many, many reasons. I will delay all of them right now and just simply say, hello, welcome, and how are you doing today?
Thank you for having me on. I'm a huge fan of the pod, and I'm just happy to be here and finally get to talk with you and build.
This is like, it's first of all, you being on the podcast is perfect timing because this is like our theme is like the summer of yes and really saying yes to rest and ease and healing and all the things. And most people associate several things with summer. And one of those things is reading. And I am like there's such an intersection in many ways with what the work that you do with love of reading, my own personal love of reading, the way I do therapy. There's just so much here. And I want to start by kind of talking about the work, right? One, I think I need to take a further step back, which is just to have you define what a bibliotherapist is. Let's just start with that. That's the easiest one. So we can set the context of how you've spent the last decade weaving this into your work. So what is and who is a bibliotherapist?
Absolutely. That's a really important question because in the book community, we love to say books are my therapy. So that's not what bibliotherapy with a licensed, board certified mental health professional is. However, there are other professionals that utilize the technique of bibliotherapy. Youth counselors, pastors, educators, librarians, right, are bibliotherapists in their own right. And so for me as a licensed clinical social worker who diagnoses and treats, mental health challenges, bibliotherapy is really the incorporation of literature. So the use of intentionally selected texts for emotional healing or to support the therapeutic process of emotional healing, personal development, and self-discovery.
Beautiful. And I just think that's important to make that distinction. And so
Yeah.
you have spent at least the last decade doing this, right? This kind of work. And even further back when I'm reading your book and you're talking
Oh,
about how you started this even before. Oh yeah, girl, I've got your book. And I have not
thank
finished reading it
you.
very intentionally. It's not a book I'm rushing through because one, I want to use it in my therapy practice. Two, it's a lot to digest and think about as you go through. So I am still reading it, but I am loving it. And you talk about in graduate school working with, the schizophrenia population and talking about the first time you're using this. So you've been doing this for a long time in some iterations. And that is what inspired you to write this book, which is Bibliotherapy in the Bronx. And so I want to know parts more about the other pieces that inspired this book. And how did this book change your relationship with stories and fiction and literature and poetry.
Ooh, I love that so much. First of all, thank you for supporting the book and for reading it. I love to hear therapists say that they're going slow with it. I always tell people who read it who are not clinicians that it's meant to reflect less of a therapy session and more of a therapy process. So it's meant to kind of go
Yes.
slow and really, like you said, think about the ideas in the text and think about how it lands in you as a reader, as a service provider, maybe as an educator, as a therapist. So I just love hearing people say that they're going slow. I think we read so voraciously, those of us that love literature, that there's just something about moving through a text slowly and intentionally. So I love to hear that. Um, in terms of this piece around, the book and the process behind the book, there's so much to say about that, right? Like, that could be the entire podcast, but really
Yes.
this book is born from love, not just my love of reading, but my love for my community. The Bronx truly was the place where I became a healer. I always say, because when I got to the Bronx as a freshman at Smith College School for Social Work, Smith's program is structured a little differently. So you get placed in a city, you work all year, and then you return to campus for the summer term to take your courses. And so I moved to the Bronx as a young woman, and I become a student there, a student of life there. This is also the first place where I really grow roots because as a foster kid, I moved around a lot growing up. And so it wasn't just training ground for my years as a grad school student, but it was also where I started to work in schools. I worked in schools at the elementary and middle school level for 12 years. And then after the pandemic, started my private therapy practice there. And that was really my opportunity to niche down as a bibliotherapist and to incorporate all of the training and all of the knowledge and expertise that I have using poetry, literature, and story to help folks heal. So that time at the day treatment facility for adults with schizophrenia was super formative to my journey becoming a healer because, at the day treatment facility, you receive wraparound services. So clients were, you know, assigned a social worker, a psychiatrist. We had activities and socialization groups and clinical groups that structured a client's day. And so as a student, we were tasked with developing our own group. And so initially, when I had said I would do a poetry therapy group, you know, the administration was kind of like, what poetry therapy with folks who struggle with reality orientation? And I was like, yeah, I've done this before in different iterations of it, never with this specific population. But I knew that given the history of the clientele there, many of whom were former hip hop artists, b-boys, poets, that they'd really resonate with the spoken word or the written word. And so when I started recruiting for the group and actually getting clients curious about group, attendance improved, clients were really connecting to one another, sharing aspects of their story through the poetry that we were reading that really actually inspired some wonderful conversations with their social workers and with their psychiatrists, and it became less pathologized. I think there's a lot of pathology specifically around schizophrenia, especially in communities of color. And we know, right, in the 1960s, like this was a diagnosis that was predominantly given to Black Americans. And so, what does it mean now for me to come in and be like, it's all good. We're gonna read some poetry and we're gonna heal together. And to get people actually like connecting to their stories to one another, actually coming to program and showing up because they're really connecting with this art form. It was so healing, not just for the clientele, but I think for the day treatment program as a whole. And so that began the conversation of what other ways can we incorporate the creative expressive arts, into the day treatment facility. And it's sad because the facility is no longer there. It was defunded. And this is the case, in the mental health industrial complex where unfortunately, funding gets cut, programs close. But for the time that I was there, that was so formative to me and in me as a student and as a budding therapist. And I think the book really is a reflection of that, of my love for the clients whose life I've touched, who's touched my life, and really just wanting to share a blueprint for healing that feels culturally rooted and not strictly clinical.
And I think that's what's so important about bibliotherapy is one, it's not taught, I'm a licensed clinical therapist. This is not something that's like a foundational teaching or you're taught to practice this. And yet when you start, if you have had a love of literature or if you have been moved by the arts, I have found when I have talked to other people and peers, it finds elements of it, whether you know it or not, finds its way into your practice, whether you know it or not, right? So for me, I my first job out of graduate school was working in a men's prison system. That's where I wanted to work. And I worked with people who are considered, the worst behaved in the state and, make them better. And one of the things we started was a poetry book group, a book club. Like we started
Yeah.
using these elements. Oh, yes, I was all in and I loved it. And I never knew the framework or knowledge that this is like an actual practice. This is an actual modality. I just knew that the people that I met that were in prison were highly creative folks, right? Like you said, the people that you had met in the day treatment center were former hip hop artists or spoken word poets or
Yep.
musicians. And I had met the same. And I had always encouraged the arts with every single person I had worked with because mostly selfishly I was pulling from myself and I knew how much the arts had healed me. I'd grown up around people who had used different arts and I knew for me the power of reading and how much it had healed me. And I said, well, I don't know all that there is to know about social work because I'm new at this, y'all, but I know what has made me feel good. And if you have threads of
Yes.
that in your life that you're like, oh, yeah, I write, then I'm like, well, we're going to dig more into that because that seems like a strength that we want to like amplify. And that's kind of why it brings me to telling you like healing through story and the importance of that, right? That there is one, again, we're very clear there's a modality called bibliotherapy and being a bibliotherapist, right? And we are not
Right.
here to say that y'all can read a book and become a bibliotherapist. Go to Emily if you're licensed in her state and to other folks who actually specialize in this. But I do want to pull on the thread for this conversation about the healing power of stories in a way that I don't think we've ever really talked about. And so for you, what does that mean to you? And what's a book that has personally helped you heal to kind of set the tone for how you discuss this and how you see the power of story to heal?
Absolutely. Well, when we talk about healing, I think it's important to define what that means and perhaps different folks define that differently. For me as a clinician, I always think about the way that trauma fragments the mind and the heart, right? And so the goal of a healing process is to integrate all of those pieces. And not to say that, I am so completely devastated over the life experiences that I've had that like I can't bounce back, finding a way to an entry point to a process that says recreating a life that is more aligned with who I've become and honors the difficult, painful experiences that I've been through. Like the integration of that is what I call healing. And I think that that requires that we do a lot of shadow work, that we excavate things that we often deny or repress, right? I think it's very scary for a lot of people to turn inward, and so a healing process for me is really about the acceptance of life events that have happened to us that maybe we didn't have any control over, that have left us feeling devastated, victimized, and complete and utter shock, right? The trauma of that. But saying that I'm going to reclaim my narrative and I'm going to find a way to make something beautiful out of those painful experiences. In other words, like life doesn't get to dictate my outcomes, I do. And so I think by connecting with story, we not only see that survival is possible, but we actually gain new language to be very specific and to name things what they are. We also gain insight into the experiences of others who've lived maybe similar or different, very different life experiences, but how did they traverse that landscape or how did they find a way back to themselves after such tremendous loss? Like, how does somebody go on living after losing a parent or someone who is so pivotal as an anchor in their life, right? Like, these are real questions that we all have as human beings. And I think connecting with story helps us to do that shadow work, to turn inward, to really reflect on not just what happened, but what was lost, right? What has changed that can never go back to the way that it was so that we can practice acceptance of that, and then build something new. Um, that's more in alignment with who we're becoming. And I find that connecting with story offers folks hope, offers folks a roadmap for healing and for that integration that often has to happen when life has just knocked us off our feet. Um, I also think that there's a way that, Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop writes about this, the multicultural godmother of children's literature, we call her. She says books are mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. So books are a mirror so we can see ourselves more clearly, a window into the experience of another, and a sliding glass door where we can actually step into the shoes of another, and live life through their lens. And that's really important because I think the books that truly change us from the inside out are books that we emotionally connect to, that take us on an emotional journey where we can actually like look at some of that hard stuff and do some of that excavation work and see, what the possibilities are for healing. And so for me personally, there's so many books that have helped me heal. Like I can't even, that would be another hours long conversation, but most recently, because I'm rereading it with a client right now, it's Heavy by Kiese Lehman. I love that memoir so much. I remember the first time I read it, it cracked me open. The way that Kiese writes about being a young Black boy growing up in Mississippi, the love of his grandmother, the tumultuous relationship with his own mother. It was one of the first times that I'd say I read a story written by a Black author that grew up around a lot of trauma, right? What another person might say, um, pathology in the family or community, but he doesn't write about it that way. He writes it with so much love for his family and community, and it makes the reader curious about, wow, what is my relationship to my community, to my body, to my fear, to my rage? He writes in a way that helps us to honor our emotional states instead of judge them, and also honor all the weird and wild experiences that we go through coming of age, in our families, um, from a lens that's super compassionate, not just towards others, but towards the self. So I've got to go with Heavy, and I think in general, Kiese is just such an amazing truth teller. He's not just a phenomenal writer, but he really has the spirit of a truth teller. Um, and he just reminds us that healing isn't always pretty, but it's always holy. It's a way to
And possible.
self-honor and possible, yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have to check that book that goes on the list. I think that's beautiful. And as you were talking, to me, who's not a bibliotherapist, so I'm thinking this in much more simpler terms, of the sense of like, well, what did I get out of reading, and how did reading like heal me? And a lot of times, I was an avid fiction reader, and I just got language. Like
Yes,
I would see somebody experience it, like, oh, I've experienced that before. What is this person saying about X? Right. And then to be
yeah,
able to be like, oh, this is a language that I connect to but have never used in my life. Like I wouldn't think that, but I really identify with this character. And it really got me through tough times, or I started identifying with certain kinds of protagonists. And it gave me a language, one for myself, and it gave me a language of connection. So
yeah,
for me, I grew up in a predominantly white area, so I did not have the benefit. I started reading, I read early on, always read like African literature, fiction, and my mom always made sure there was culture in our house. So I want to be clear about this. But to the outside community, they have no reference for anything Black other than probably back in the day, LeVar Burton's Reading Rainbow, right? Like that's the
yes,
Blackest thing in my community that they ever had, right? So for me, reading was a way, like I naturally gravitated to all types of fiction. So reading like the classics, and reading like Little Women and identifying with like Joe March, and
mm,
reading like Anna Green Gables and identifying with Anna Green Gables, and saying, I see myself in these
classic,
women. Like I have this personality. Like now I could go find my people who are also reading that and saying, yeah, I see myself as this character. So it gave me both
yes,
language for myself, and like how I related to myself. Like I wasn't able to say I'm fiercely independent, maybe a little over functioning like Joe and these other women are. There's a commonality here, and like Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. But like I'm fiercely independent. I may not be the prettiest girl, because that was always the refrain. But I am smart and I have
mhm,
value. And it was a way to give language. I couldn't say all that at 12, right? But I could say, I'm like Joe. And that would
Right.
be a shorthand language for people to be like, "Oh, I get what that means slightly," right? Like that means like you're independent, that means you're the smart one, that means that you're a little bit of a rebel and you're going to do things your own way. Like it gave me that language. And so when I think about people and the power of reading and how it's changed us in ways we haven't even thought about, right? Like you're giving a context and a new lens to reflect for people listening to be like, oh yeah, what did stories heal in me? And what stories did I identify that I said, I may not know the language, but I know this person. Like
Yeah.
I feel this person. Like I feel who they are. And if somebody else is reading this book and I say, I'm feeling this character, they now have a common language to understand what I mean by that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you just shared something really crucial to the therapeutic process of bibliotherapy, the emotional recognition and attachment that you develop to a fictional character. Because I have a client who
Yes.
always says like if I don't give a dang about the character, I'm not going to want to finish the book. Absolutely,
I'm,
right?
I'm
And
out.
so I'm out. What's
Yes.
the point? There's too many books, so little time. So I think that that's really important. And also that one of the clinical goals of bibliotherapy with a licensed mental health professional is improving one's reality orientation. So what you just said is so important about
Mhm.
being a Black girl growing up in a predominantly white community, not having your Black girlhood intersection reflected in your community, but you could find that in a book. And so even by
Yes.
and so I love what you say too about Pride and Prejudice, Anne of Green Gables, right? Like you're connecting with the text that you do have access to. And also, let's be honest, this is what we were taught in our curriculums as young Black girls,
Correct.
right? Coming of
Correct.
age. But
Correct.
you could still glean some wisdom from those mirrors, being rambunctious, being really smart. Having that language is so important because for many of us, these conversations are not actively happening at home. Um, or at school on an emotional level that's truly like fostering that kind of self-reflection. And so I just love to see it. And I think that really speaks to the emotional landscape and the language and rhythm of how connecting with story really reflects us back to ourselves. That validation, that affirmation, the sense that we gather of who we are and who we're becoming in a safe way, right? Outside of the social judgment of others, which is my favorite aspect of reading. Because I think that sometimes
Yes.
we're so self conscious and we're so afraid of like saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. So the ease that you have just in picking up a book and really exploring, well, what do I feel? What do I think? What is the way that I would describe this thing that I know I'm experiencing, but maybe don't have language for it yet? Connecting with story supports all of that.
Yes, and stories do heal. I mean, I hear people and I see people and I've experienced the healing power of stories. And stories and having fiction is this like foundation of softness you can return to again and again. So like I
Yes.
find books that have healed me. Like for me, I would say my seminal book, there's been many books, I've read a lot of them, but when I think about a book that truly healed me, that like formed who I was, it's Their Eyes Are Watching God by
Mhm.
Zora Neale Hurston. And
Classic.
it's an intentional pick. It's classic. It's an intentional pick in many ways because it showed me a reality of a soft Black girl, and it's a journey of a soft Black girl to come home to herself. Like she starts out open and soft and like the bees and like, oh, I love nature and running around. There's a level of innocence and romanticism about her life, and life gets in the way.
Ooh, does
Spoiler,
it?
like spoiler condensed. Life gets in the way, and she talks about not being petal open was like her metaphor for being open to the world around her. And
Yeah.
really, what always struck me about the novel was like it's a woman's return to self. That's what I loved about it. It's like it has a lot of tragedy in it. Trigger for y'all, like maybe this ain't the
Mm.
summer light read you're looking for, but there's something about the way it ends. And I remember how powerful it was in my 20s. I carried around the last page of that book in my
Yeah.
purse. And I would read it when she says she calls out her soul, she casts her net out to bring her soul back to herself. And I remember being like, I don't know if I know what that means because I'm like a hot 22, but I know there's something about this woman. I want to be Janie when I'm 40. And
Yeah.
now I'm here in my 40s and I'm rereading it. I reread it every year, but I reread it again from the perspective of a woman who then had not maybe the same life events, but understands the process of how life can make you smaller, make you
Mm.
more quiet, make you lose that girl that you had. And in your 40s, I feel like you fight for it back. I feel like that's the time where you go, you know what? Forget it, y'all. I did it your way. I'm going to do it mine. I'm going to get my
Yes.
overalls on, put my hair in a
That's
braid, and reclaim myself like Janie did, right? And
I
so
love
that is the power of story. That is how it heals you. And even without you knowing it, like Kelly at 22, reading that book and just knowing it meant something. Like I read it in college and I just knew this is my person. Like I don't
yeah.
know how I know it because I'm not 40 and she seemed old to me. But I love the journey she's on and I relate
Yeah.
and it's so beautifully written and the words call to me. And then coming into it now as someone who's actually, my soul is broken saying this, older than Janie in the book at the end of it, and being like, oh, I get
Yeah.
it in a whole new level. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the power of reading and power of community and power, like it's layered, right? It's like power of reading, power of words, power of Black community, power of Black
Mhm.
femininity. Like all of these things stack up. And I think, what would my life be like if I didn't have her? Like
Right.
I feel like there's a
Right.
piece of myself that wouldn't have been self-actualized because I didn't know I never would have met this person, this
Yeah.
character who felt very real to me.
Yeah. She is so real to us, right? And she taught us so much about love, about loving, about being
Yes.
loved, around how loving the wrong person could send you down the wrong path, right? I love
Ruin
what
your
you
whole life.
said. It ruined your whole life, right? But talk about healing being possible and reinvention. I mean, Janie has so much to teach us. And I just love to hear you say you reread it and you read it again. Each different life phase illuminates something new. And I love that about rereading text. I always recommend rereading text, especially those that resonated deeply with us when we were younger, because we get to see ourselves so clearly through the text. You know, there are things that I read
Yeah.
now. I'm going to be 40 in September, and I'm just so blown away at the multiple layers of meaning and symbolism that unlocked something in me when I was younger that, like you said earlier, maybe I didn't fully understand the meaning of it, but I could feel the emotional impact of it. And that carried me
Yes.
through. And so coming back to it now, I'm like, wow, that's what that was. That emotional resonance. I get that now. Like I've been through some things now. Mama has lived. Like I get what she was saying now. I'm picking up what, the author was putting down. I feel that way a lot about Toni Morrison's work. Um, now that
Yes. It hits different.
it hits different. It hits different every time.
It does. It really, for me, Maya Angelou and like her poetry and different things hit different at different ages, you know? And I think that's the great thing about it is when you can use books to heal and to help and recognize yourself, it becomes like this little like I don't know, compass that you can go back to over and over to kind of guide you. You know, that
Yeah.
reminds you, oh yeah, or this hits different. It just hits different at different stages of your life, and that's literally speaks to the greatness of the writers too. I mean, there's some things that don't hit different. You're like, that was fun,
Yeah.
and it doesn't hit different 20 years later, but it's still when you have good text and good writing, and you really more so like I think you're saying really well, you emotionally recognize and emotionally connect. That's the key part, right? It
Yes.
is going to hit different at different parts of your life. And I think that is what's so cool about it. And for you, when you are working with someone, because you're kind of laying the groundwork of how we talk about, oh, I felt recognized, or this might be maybe it's a similar story, even like this is really close to your life experience. How do you intentionally choose books that hit for people in your practice that represent them, particularly when we're talking about Black and brown folks, right? How do you go about that process a little bit? If you have someone sitting in front of you, I'm coming to see you. How would you pick books? Like, what's your process for that?
Yeah. Well, true to form and the work that we do, I always conduct an intake. And I also have a reading intake version of that. And so I'll ask the client my three P's. What is your presenting problem? So why is the client coming to me? What
Mhm.
are their preferences as a reader? So what genres do you prefer? Who's an author by author? What's the last book that you read that really emotionally resonated with you? What's the last book that you read that you hated, right? That you never want to read
Yeah.
again? Or that you did not finish, right? Like what are triggers in books for you? I'm trying to get a sense of who my client
Mhm.
is as a reader and whether or not this methodology would actually be effective for them clinically. If I find that bibliotherapy is a method that would work for them, then I'm going to move on to my third and final step, which is the book prescription. And so when I'm prescribing or curating literature for a client, it's always going to match the emotional tempo of what we're working on. So I'm really going to try to align that with the clinical goals. What are we doing? Are we talking about grief healing? What's going on in the client's life? What question is the client sort of sitting with? And what is a good text or poem or literature that's answering that question, in other words? And so when I'm sort of curating, I'm not just looking for books that censor visibility, right? Because sometimes we said like
Mhm.
representation matters, and it absolutely does. But just because like a client comes to me and they're, Caribbean and they're dealing with depression, it doesn't mean that, okay, I'm going to have to find a Caribbean author who's writing about,
Yes.
grief, or it's not that simple, right? I'm looking specifically for what is the client going to connect with. Of course, I'm always taking into consideration intersections. So that's really important. But I first have to understand what the client is looking for in a therapeutic process using literature. And then I have to find something that's not just going to be about visibility, but censor voice. Because we all know this, like representation matters, but sometimes representation is, just beating off stereotype, right? Sometimes just because you
Yes.
have
Yes.
diverse character in a book doesn't mean that the book is trauma informed, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Sometimes fictional books in
Yes.
particular tend to pathologize characters' mental health struggles, or the entire identity and personality of a character is their mental health struggle. So that's another thing. Before I prescribe a text, I've always read it. I never prescribe anything that I haven't read from beginning to end myself, because I want to make sure that it's actually going to be a therapeutically appropriate text, and that it's essentially ending on a note of hope, that healing is possible. And so
Yeah.
that's really how I kind of like find the range of what we're working within, and then I'll prescribe a text that I think is going to match the emotional tempo of the work that we're doing. And there's a lot of different ways that this could look. Sometimes it's prescriptive. So bibliotherapy could also be your therapist just saying, which we do often, hey, read this book. I think it will really help with your understanding or facilitate some self-reflection based on the work we're doing in our sessions. And sometimes bibliotherapy is interactive, where you're actually reading in session with your client. And Dr. Nicholas Maza, who is a mentor of mine and also one of the fathers of poetry therapy, he has a lot of different ways he trains social workers to do this. So sometimes you start your session with a poem, or sometimes you end your session with a poem. There's a lot of different ways you can structure a session to facilitate a therapeutic process using literature.
I love that. And I love that too. What's really important to me, like I got all the way relaxed, y'all who are watching me. I'm like all crouched up in
Mm,
my in
I
my
love that.
in my seat because I'm so excited. One of the things I love about what you said that has always been a concern for me is re-traumatization, like re-traumatizing yourself. Basically, a
Yeah.
lot of times people are stuck in like their past, they're stuck in a technically we'd say like this trauma loop, this trauma narrative. But
Yeah.
you're just stuck in a sad story. And so you're consuming content. One of the things that I'm really about here with Black Girl Burnout is like stepping into joy more and not staying. It's not that we acknowledge it or reject it, but we don't stay, we don't live, we don't build a home in the sadness or build a home in the tragedy. And what happens is sometimes you'll find folks who are stuck in a like, what do you read? And you're listening and you're like, oh, it's only Toni Morrison and you have a significant trauma history. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that may not be the thing that's gonna get you where you want. And also I love how inclusive you are about literature and finding ways. It may be a poem by a white man that
Yeah.
is hits on these themes that hit the point that's like, okay, because again, it's the therapy value. It's not necessarily, and representation does matter, and obviously you want to ground people in recognition, but the themes and the healing comes in many different like surprising forms. And being open to that is just very exciting. Like that's exciting to me. And I think for anybody who is thinking about this, because we're going to shift into like fun reading lists in a minute, but
My
I don't
favorite.
want to move on. I love it too, but I don't want to move on without saying for anybody who is thinking about this, I'm going to consult with you to come up with like who some people to think about or ways to find a bibliotherapist in your neighborhood, in your area, in your state. I certainly am going to be taking classes on it and learning about it and integrating it very lightly in my practice because I do believe in the power of it and I want to get better at it. Now that I know it exists as a formality, I'm like, okay, I need to be in this. This is my jam. This calls to me.
You've been
So
doing
I
it.
want
You've
people
been
to know
doing
that it's
it.
open. Yes. I've been doing it in small little ways and I want to keep now formalizing how I do that. But I want to encourage you for people who've always felt like therapy isn't relatable to me. I don't want to just sit and talk about my problems.
Yeah.
This might be the thing for you if you're a reader or if you're someone who's moved by the arts, right? Never discount the power of therapy and that it's just about finding the fit, not
Yes.
necessarily that it's not for you. It's that it's the right fit. And so I just want people, especially as the world feels harder, sadder, tougher to navigate, that you know that therapy is always a really good option. It's just about finding the right type. And this is just one example that we've been talking about now that could be a fit for you as a Black woman or as anybody who's listening to this podcast now. This works for anybody. So I wanted to do this plug because I think that's important that
Yes.
we don't, before I go like, girl, what you reading this summer? I want I want to first anchor into something really powerful just happened in the last 30 minutes, and it's that you all have an opportunity to find a new way to heal and a new way to move forward and grow. And it can be, this is an option for you through bibliotherapy. So that's my plug.
A
So
very
important.
important plug. A very important plug, especially now.
Yes, especially now. So when we talk about constipation, bloating, heaviness, sluggishness, these aren't just random symptoms. They're actually your gut's way of telling you something's off. Look, I'm going to be real with you. As a podcaster and a consultant and a writer, I'm always on the go. And I have struggled for years to maintain my energy, to really keep myself kind of together with bloating around my cycle, all the things you can think of. This is where Oxy Powder from Global Healing came in. Oxy Powder isn't just another cleanse or a quick fix. It's a targeted oxygen based formula that gently and safely breaks down and flushes out waste and toxins that build up in your gut over time. I take it at night, and by the morning, I'm feeling lighter and clearer, just better. Oxy Powder is easy to take, and because of that, it's become a staple in my routine. And I'm not the only one. A consumer study showed incredible results. 95% said that it relieved constipation, 87% said it felt relief from bloating, and a massive 95% said they would use it again, with 93% recommending it to a friend. If you're tired of feeling weighed down, trust me on this. Head over to globalhealing.com/heal and try Oxy Powder for 20% off. You'll thank me later. That's globalhealing.com/heal. As we shift, the summer is here, Emily, and
Ooh.
we are, yes, finally, we are leaning into rest, reading, and for me, pleasure. And so I asked you, which for me would be like the most fun question ever, but I asked you, like, I want a joyful and summer reading list. You don't have to give an exhaustive one, but do you got some recs for us and what books will be on it? I have a few because I was thinking, I said, I can't let Emily have this alone. I love to read. Do you have a few recommendations for us?
Absolutely. And I'm so excited that you have some for me because this is my favorite part of connecting with bibliophiles. So, depending on your vibe and what joy means to you, right? Because we all experience joy differently. And so I would say right off the top, Big Swiss by Jen Biegan. This is a very a little bit unhinged read, but I think we all need at least one feral read for the summer. And summertime is the best time to read unhinged stories. I mean, obviously. So
Yes.
what's really interesting about this book is that the protagonist is Greta. She transcribes therapy sessions for a sex coach. She gets really
Okay.
obsessed with this one particular client of the sex coach as she's transcribing. And then she ends up meeting this client in real life and forming a relationship with this client that really illuminates some things about her. It's a completely insane story, but I think it's one for the readers who love that. and
Yes.
are looking for a thrill that is not, packaged up neatly. Um, I also have to recommend, it's out today, When the Music Hits by my friend Amber Oliver. I love this book so much. Amber is a Bronx native. She's worked in publishing for over 10 years, and this is her debut um, fiction novel. And there's just so much that I love about Billy's story. Billy is an ambitious, young Black woman, like many of us. She wants to work in the music industry. She has all these dreams for what that's going to look like after college. And then, we've all been there. You graduate college, you enter the workforce, and then you realize, like, oh, I was not ready for the reality of this. And so it's really about
Yes.
being an ambitious, really talented Black creative who's navigating predominantly white spaces, trying to find your voice and really sitting with the ethical questions of, like, what am I willing to tolerate to get to the dream that I have? And is that the only way to go about it? And then layered in that story is all of the other family and community aspects of Billy's life that she's navigating. She has a wonderful partner, Lucas, who just loves her to pieces. I love when I see Black love in a fiction
Yes.
story that's like nuanced but that's healthy, grounded, right? Like, it's real about how hard relationships
Yes.
can be sometimes, but it's grounded and it's just like real friendship and love. And that's what Billy and Lucas have. So I have to recommend Amber Oliver's book. If you're someone who just needs rest this summer, I highly recommend Trisha Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance. And she's got another one that recently came out as well. Trisha Hersey is a great author to carry in your summer bag because her books are really small and they're super nourishing for the spirit. The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Philon. I love this short story collection. I think we should all have a book of poetry or a short story collection in our bags this summer because you can dip in and out of books like that and you can meet your quota of reading at least 15, 20 minutes a day that way. And I just love this short story collection because it's all about the secret lives of church ladies, right? And some of the stories are really subversive and some are really reflective. And also, like, joy lives in complexity. So I think it's a great collection. And lastly, Under the Neon Lights by Ariel Vincent. If you're someone who loves novels in verse, this is a YA novel in verse that came out recently. So many reasons why I love this book, but really, it's really about third spaces and communities. So it takes place really at the roller skate rink that's local to this Black community. But there's like breaking up with your best friend vibes, coming of age vibes, falling in love for the first time vibes, confronting, a parent who is just not doing what they're supposed to do, and how do you go about forgiveness on your terms, not feeling pressured to just forgive because that's what you've been taught to do. It's such a beautiful story, and these are all like really heartwarming as well. So not too much trauma, not too much heaviness, and
Yes.
even if it is on the page, it's very light, and the outcomes are always loving and hopeful. What you got? I'm
Yes.
curious.
Now I felt like I'm underprepared. I had to bring out my phone. I'm like, I got to remember what. So first, well, I could pretty much match some of what you said. So the first book, Big Twist. If you like the first book, A Big Twist, I think you might like a book called Dirty Diana.
I don't know that
It's
one.
by two women. It's by two. It was a podcast that became book. I would say book one, okay. Book two, it's a series of three. It just goes, it's unhinged. I look, I'm just saying, y'all, it's not suitable for it's out there. It's a lot going on. But what is interesting, to your point about this woman who's listening to podcasts and she's like connecting, this woman turns to her art is primarily listening to people's fantasies. And what is really unique about it is her art in her 20s is the main character is that she in her 20s would listen to people's stories, their fantasies, and she would create art. But her art was never explicit. Even if the fantasies were, the art was actually like it'd be a line like I felt seen, and she'd draw the person as a representation of being seen. It was all women, beautiful women, and just like the the reverence for women who, it's really like a metaphor for like how women are repressed and how they
Yeah.
don't articulate themselves. So that's who she was in the 20s. And we fast forward to find her in her 40s, extremely unhappy in a marriage that doesn't feel fulfilling. And she can no longer communicate to her partner, her husband, what's missing. And she has an old
Mhm.
boyfriend who was her artist muse and he was a photographer. Anyways, it's a very interesting for people who care about that or are married or looking for the exploration of how women repress and hide themselves. It's not so much about sexuality and sex, it's a vehicle by which she's able to articulate what's missing in her life, the words that she wants in her life. And so
I
that is
love
interesting, but it's also
that.
very frothy and light.
This sounds amazing.
A lot of people read it and said, "No, girl, this not that deep." I found it to be very deep. But that would be my rec there. I would say I also had Trisha Hersey's Rest is Resistance on my list. And if you are looking for like fun romance, light romance, I love me some romance novels. And I love like a really
Me
light,
too.
fluffy, fun romance. So some people that you may be familiar with that are Black authors, Black women authors. I really love Jasmine Guillory. She runs the range of like Black women with Black men, Black women with Latino men. I think the one that I like the most, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head because I'd written it down. I left my piece of paper in the other room, is The Proposal, I think it's called. I will make sure I clarify this for you all readers and make sure the list is right.
Great
Where it's a Black
one.
woman and she goes to this ball game and she meets this Latino man and it's about the relationship. It's fun. There's nothing deep there. It's just a really great, fun, thoughtful, tender take on love. And it doesn't have huge challenge. They're not navigating some trauma. It's just like fun. Also, I like Talia Hibbert's Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This is a Black British author who
Great
writes about
series.
people with, in this case, great series. So you know who this is. So about chronic illness and the limitations it can make people to feel about themselves when they can't. This is a Black woman who's chronically ill, plus size, and trying to navigate her life and feeling like parts of her life are not accessible to her. She's hid herself because of her illness and because of several other things. And it's about her journey, one through love, but more importantly, it's bigger than that. It's like her journey to get out there into the world despite her many limitations, quote unquote limitations. So that book is really good. I think for that, if you see yourself or have chronic illness, I think you'll see yourself in the story. One of my favorite books of all time is Carlos Ruiz Zafán's The Shadow in the Wind. And it is the
Mm.
story, it's a love letter to books. And it's about a book that has gone missing. There's a book that's been written that no one can find anymore because someone is going around burning every single copy of this book. And that's all I will say because there's a lot more underneath it. But if you love travel, it's an ode to Barcelona because it takes place in Barcelona, Spain. And it's just a really interesting story and tale. It's a protagonist is a young boy, is growing up and becoming a man and figuring out who is the shadowy figure who was trying to burn every single copy of this book that was ever made. It's beautifully written. It feels good when you're in it. Like you feel like you're in Spain. You want to know what the final story is. Like, what's the mystery? What's going on here? And there is a love story on the way. So those are some of my fun. I think I have so many other ones, but those are some fun ones. I feel like none
Thank
of those ones that I
you.
recommended are going to be like, there's some other ones. There's another one called Liquid by Mariam Ramani. I'm reading that currently. It's heavy as far as text. She's smarter than me. I need a thesaurus. But the plot is this woman's trying to get rich. She wants to marry rich and she's going on
Period.
dates.
She
She's
wants
like,
to
it's
get
hard
it.
out here, period. She's going on dates to find herself a sugar partner. A really high.
Okay. I know that's right.
It's really highbrow. I'm like, girl, you too smart for me. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna finish it. Not because it's not well written. I'm like, I don't think I'm smart enough. I might need to come back to the fall. But I love the premise. I'm like, I'm here for this premise of her being like, it's hard out here. I'm tired.
Right.
I'm gonna go get a sugar person. So it's her
Listen.
journey. Obviously, I think we know how this is gonna end. She's gonna be enlightened and she's gonna fall. She's got a best friend who's in the background there, who's waiting to be rich. She's gonna be rich one day. So I think she's gonna end up with the best friend. I don't think that's a spoiler, but there's that. And then if you like Unhinged, my last recommendation, if you like Unhinged like thrillers, because I think we all need like a good thriller, right?
Yeah,
Like the summer
absolutely.
is all about like what is some ridiculousness that we can get into. There's a couple that I really love. I'm currently reading, because I read multiple things at once. I'm reading Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister.
I've heard good things about that.
She's married to a man and he just disappears one day, and it turns out he's like a murderer and holding people hostage. And the book starts there. That's where the book starts. She's like, "Where's my husband? I'm coming off maternity leave," and he's in a like a shootout. And that's where the book starts.
Immediately, yes. I'm curious.
Immediately, yes. And the first thing is like he writes her a letter on like the counter, and it's his last words. And so it's all about her unraveling the mystery of like,
Wow.
who is this man? Who is this man that I married who's caught up in something, I don't know what's happening yet, but I was like, immediately, yes, agreed. Like, I'm like, okay, I need to know. There's a hostage a hostage situation happening in London, and I need to know what this man did. Like, what's this man doing? So that's the story. It's her figuring it out. What happened to her husband and what life was he living?
Listen, you just gave
Those are
us
Americans.
an amazing script right there. Thank you. Because you just put like 3 more books on my radar for the summer. I cannot wait to get into The Shadow and the Wind. I'm going to buy that one immediately.
So good. One of my favorite books that I've ever read. So good.
Wow.
Really thoughtful. And it's got like a little guide. If you go to Barcelona ever, it has a whole like follow the shadow of the wind and go to these different places that really exist, which I love that kind of stuff. I love immersive books where you can get more.
That's bibliotherapeutic right there.
That's it.
Take your emotional, because sometimes
Bibliotherapeutic.
you ever love a book so much that when it's done, you just wish that you could read it again for the first time. So like, I love things like that.
Yes.
If you love this book so much, why don't you take this with you to Barcelona sometime and like go on this literary map adventure? That's such a brilliant way.
I have done it. I've done Pride and Prejudice too,
Wow.
where I've like driven out to like places that could represent the characters. And like, I love the movie Pride and Prejudice, the 2000 version. And so I've driven to all the locations. I just feel like that's another way to take your reading to the next level.
And
love
have it be. There you go. That's bibliotherapy, baby. That's what we're talking about.
It's so integrative. It's so
Right.
integrative. So this is your reading list. I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
And I might even have some more reading. We might have a bonus little where we talk more about books. But for now, I got to land the plane on this episode, and I could talk about books for 5 hours. Literally, it's like my love language.
Yes.
But let's do some lightning round fun to close out this episode, all right?
Okay,
So
let's do it.
Here's one for you. What's a quote or a line from a book that's lived in your heart for years?
You are your best thing. Toni Morrison and Beloved.
Love that. Love that. Okay. Summer has kind of just began for us, so I'm going to give you some grace here. It could be a past song, but what do you think is a song of the summer right now, or has been your song of the summer? It doesn't have to be the cultural one. It could just be, this is like a song of the summer for me.
Yeah. Honestly, Good Days by SZA. I love SZA. And I just feel like Good Days is such a high vibration song, vitamin D for the spirit.
It's such a good song. It is a good song. Right now, my song of the summer has been Olivia Dean's Nice to Each Other. It's so sweeping and fun. She's a Black British person, and you just feel like you're in like, I don't know, you're on a boat somewhere or you're driving somewhere. It's just a really sweet, gentle song. I'm digging it. So I'm SZA though, always SZA. Okay. What's a book you'd give your younger self?
Oh, immediately The Poet by Elizabeth Acevedo. I really wish I had that kind of mirror and magic as a young girl coming up.
Oh, I love that. Okay. What's a book that you are overpacking? Let's say you're going somewhere for the summer because you just can't leave it behind. A book you're like, I just got to have this.
I have it with me right now. It's a poetry collection. We Alive Beloved by Frederick Joseph. I love this collection so much. And I just always, that's my mental health hack, is carrying poetry, one book of poetry in my bag.
I love that so much. Okay. I love that. Okay. Would you rather spend a weekend with your favorite author or inside your favorite book's world?
Goodness, Kelly, that's a good one. Okay. Take me inside the book. Just not a dystopia, please. Okay. What we're going through.
Yeah. You get to pick it.
Enough, right. Like, just not a dystopia. I want to dance. I want to eat mangoes. I want to fall in love. I want to, write poems on a rooftop kind of vibe. But definitely take me
you
inside
get to
a book.
pick.
Yeah, take me inside a book.
You definitely get to pick. You get to pick. So you don't just get dropped into one. You get to pick your favorite book and be like, I want to live here. Let
Yes.
me go into this
You know
book.
what? I'd love to live inside of Adriana Herrera, a Dominican
Okay.
romance author who just writes the best romances. I'd love to go into one of her books. Absolutely.
Okay. I too would choose the world. I know that's terrible. Sorry, authors. Sorry. I'll read about you and listen to you on
Well,
podcasts. I'm going straight
listen,
into a book. I'm going
you know
straight to the
what's
world.
funny? So, as a therapist, I know that you'll get the humor behind this, right? Me and my therapist, well, my former therapist, I loved her. I worked with her for 12 years. We would always talk about this, how like our clients, sometimes will express wanting to connect with us or be in relationship to us outside of our role as therapists. But we tell our clients, like, you don't even know if you'd like me in real life, right? Because, like, when you remove the veil and you take the boundaries away from the therapist client relationship, like, we have one idea of who someone is, and then maybe you meet them and you realize, like, oh, yeah, it's not what I thought it was going to be. So, like, same thing with authors, right? Like, sometimes we put folks on a pedestal who are the creatives who create the art that we love, but then we meet them and, like, maybe they're really mean or grumpy or, you're just
Yeah.
like, okay, I'd rather have not met you, right? So,
Yeah. Sometimes no, for real. I used to really love in my younger days and still can separate the art from the person, but I used to like Ernest Hemingway's A Movable Feast is like a book to me that taught me how to write better because I was very verbose. Ernest Hemingway is racist,
talk
not
about it.
nice, alcoholic. Like I would never want to meet him.
Recluse.
But that
Okay.
one book, Movable Feast, that book is brilliant. I'm like, this book is really brilliant. But he would not be a pick of mine. No.
Right,
I would never
right.
want to be. And I don't want to be in his worlds either. So I totally get that. You don't want to meet all your heroes. But you do know what you're getting in the world. You already read the story.
There you
And I
go.
would drop into like an Emily Henry or Taylor Jenkins Reid, like just make me black. But let me have like the fluff and the fun and the
Keep
Abby
me
Jimenez.
back.
Keep me black. Keep me black. But like, let me be like Abby Jimenez. Let drop into them famous romance girls and pick my own man, but have the same plot points like that. Yes,
I
I'm
love
dropping right in
that.
there.
I love
Yes, please
that.
give that to me.
Listen, that's the title of this episode, but keep me black. Okay, drop me into the
But
romance.
Bibliotherapy for 2025. Keep me black.
I love that.
Emily, it has been a joy having you on this podcast. Thank you for coming on. How can we connect with you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna be like definitely referencing some of these one-liners that we had in today's show. You can connect with me on social media at Litterapy, LITERAPY_NYC. I'm on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook under that handle. And you can subscribe to my website. I have a monthly bibliotherapeutic newsletter that I send out at the first of the month, and that's at literapynyc.podia.com. I also have a free book club, Readers Who Run with the Wolves on Fable and the Storygraph app. I have a community. It's $5.99 a month for therapists, educators, and librarians, where I share biweekly bibliotherapy mini courses, webinars, a monthly book list. And you can have direct access to me for your practice if you need recommendations or some consultation around using the modality in your practice. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And of course, pick up Bibliotherapy in the Bronx. Every chapter has a few bibliotherapeutic exercises and reflections. So if you want to kind of get a sense of what bibliotherapy is and what it could look like in your personal reading practice, this is the blueprint, y'all.
Seriously, grab that book. I'm already going to join your community immediately after this. I'm going to join
Oh,
it up. I'm going to tell my therapist about you and your book because she's always looking at that. Shout out to my therapist, who's a Latina and is fabulous. I won't say her name because she's like, please keep me out of your business. But shout out to my therapist, who I'm going to give her this book. I'm going to tell her that she needs to join the community too. And my other friend, who's an avid reader, who I'm just going to tell them all. Everybody's going to get this book, join this community because yes. So thank you, Emily. I
thank
could talk to you for 5
you.
hours. I may have you back just to talk about book recs because I feel like we could do a whole thing on just like challenge each other. Like book rec if you're
Yes.
struggling with depression. Book rec if you are having struggles with love. What's a healthy, loving attachment book that people should read? Because there's a whole lot of them that aren't. So to be continued. I think we could have much more to talk about. But in the meantime,
Of that.
thank you for coming on.
Thank you for
Have a
having me.
beautiful, beautiful rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. Bye, y'all.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. How can you support the podcast? Well, you're doing it right now. Continue to listen. Subscribe so you know when the latest episodes drop. Share this with friends and family. We're on a movement to opt all Black women out of struggle and into their joy. Join me and have your family members and friends join us too. You can support also by following, sharing, and subscribing across my social media platforms. It's Black Girl Burnout across them all: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Substack. Substack's like my little baby. I just am loving it there. We have deeper conversations. There's even more engagement on Substack. In 3 months, we've built thousands and thousands of followers. I am floored. If you want to support the podcast and the work that I do and the writing I do there, $8 a month, less than a fancy latte, you can be a paid member and you have access to weekly extra features, and I'm building more for those who subscribe. Also, feel free to leave a review for the podcast across Apple and Spotify. Just hit those 5 stars. I promise you it makes a difference. We're this close to having 600 reviews, so your review could be the one that makes a difference. Please, please, please leave a review. All right. And last but not least, we're having a Q&A episode at the end of the month. If you've got a question for me, there's a form in the show notes. Otherwise, you can just send me a DM on Instagram and TikTok and say, here's my question. You can ask me anything. I've been waiting my whole life for this episode. It's going to be so fun. Until next week, take care of yourself, take care of each other, rest well.